From a jellyfish that almost sent someone to the underworld to somebody who visited heaven and hell. Here are the top 5 real people who claim to have visited hell, part 3. Number 5 on this list is Victoria Callant. This is a story from a Reddit user who had a very close near-death experience. Victoria, who was living in a small town called Hammark at the time, was going on a walk through nature. She was passing by a pond when she saw what looked to be a duck struggling in the water. Its wing was beaten and bloodied and it was drowning. Something came over her and she says that she felt she needed to help it. She tried to grab a long branch and reach out to it so it could have something to grab onto, but as she was reaching out though, she slipped and hit the back of her head on the rock she was standing on, knocking her completely unconscious. What followed is one of the weirdest descriptions of hell that I've ever read. She says that it felt as if she was in an experimental film. An indie project with no script or storyline to go off of, just weird images flying on the screen. Nothing made sense in this hell dimension that she was in, but she knew that it wasn't safe. Rather than have one god stare down on her, she said that there were many. Massive gods too, who were so tall that they might not have been able to see their own feet. She was falling this entire time before she was finally caught by something thick and silky, a massive spider web. She was stuck now and couldn't move if she wanted to. In front of her was this half spider, half human, demon looking thing looking as if Victoria was about to be its next meal. Before the spider could pounce though, a light appeared in the distance and she woke up. This has been a life-changing event for her, and after some deep therapy, getting over her newfound fear of spiders has actually helped her enjoy her day-to-day experiences a little bit more. She kept stressing in her post that there was no story, no narrative in this weird world. Nothing made sense at all and everything felt out of sorts. This is super different from our classic fiery hell universe with demons, and honestly it's a little bit more scary. I personally can't imagine how it would have been to be part of something like that and just have no idea what's happening ever. One positive from this story though is that apparently the duck she was trying to save did eventually get to safety, so at least we can hold on to that, guys. Number 4 on this list is Ian McCormack. Ian McCormack thought it was over for him. The doctors thought it was over for him. Any expert on his injuries would have thought it would have been over for him, but it wasn't. Ian got stung by a very deadly jellyfish that sent him to the emergency room. He got there late though, and it looked as if he wasn't gonna make it. He lost consciousness and said that he went somewhere he didn't expect. You see, it wasn't just black for Ian as some people report when they visit the other side. There was a bit more. He's quoted saying that there was something else there. I could feel a cold, eerie feeling as though something or someone was looking at me. He doesn't know what that thing was, but believes in his heart it was evil, whatever it could have been. He was in this dark, scary void for what felt like an eternity and kept praying to get out of it. He said that he prayed to God and God answered those prayers. While he was down there, a bright light illuminated the entire void he was in and filled him with warmth. Then a hand, shrouded in light, reached out and grabbed his arm and pulled him back from the dead. This is how he described it, and apparently it was such a harrowing journey that he's dedicated his entire life afterwards to informing people about this tale and guiding them to God. I personally find it really interesting that hell for Ian, as he describes it, was a dark void filled with cold. It kind of reminds me of what space would be like if you had a massive unknown entity just watching you and stalking your every movement. If that is truly what hell is, then that's almost more scary than the fiery demon city that we always picture. At least if you were in that fire land, there would be others there with you as well. But can you imagine just floating around this dark, cold, empty void for eternity all by yourself? That might be the worst punishment imaginable, and I can totally understand how coming back from that would change your life forever. Number 3 on this list is Jennifer Perez. Jennifer's story is really unique because in her experience she saw what both sides are like. Answers writes, Jennifer Perez was another young Christian who had a shocking experience with hell while she slipped in and out of consciousness. Unlike Bill Wise and Kenneth Hagin, Jennifer was first led to heaven and then to hell. She recalls finding herself standing ashamed in front of God. She acknowledged the fact that although she claimed to be a Christian, she failed to show the fruit of her faith. After this interaction, Jennifer recalls the feeling of falling. As she continued to fall, she felt her surroundings becoming hotter and hotter. She felt an unquenchable unquenchable thirst as she smelled the intense smell of sulfur. Many of the other things she shares in her accounts are similar to others, including torture, demons, screams of agony. Fortunately, Jennifer's life was spared, and she went on to share her story in hopes of warning individuals who were lost or had grown lukewarm in their faith. Wow, I cannot even imagine the feeling of falling into hell as you literally watch your life slip away from you like that. Jennifer's description of hell is very much like the classic storybook definition. Red fire everywhere, demons flying around, those who were unworthy to go to heaven getting punished for the sins they committed while they were alive. Obviously not the ideal spot to spend the remainder of your existence. The story doesn't say how she got spared, if she was just falling and then woke up coming back to life, but I think it's really interesting how she almost got into heaven and then was turned away. No wonder she's dedicated the rest of her life to restoring her faith in God and in others. Number 2 on this list is Tamara Laroux. At the young age of 15, Tamara Laroux attempted to take her own life. She felt herself leave her body as she fell at an unstoppable speed and remembers entering a space of darkness with absolutely no light. She saw a fiery pit as she took in her surroundings, screaming in complete agony. Tamara remembers seeing thousands of others around her, yet feeling a sense of total isolation. Miraculously, Tamara felt a bright hand carry her up to heaven, after which she found herself back in her home. She survived her attempt to take her own life in what the doctors could only describe as a miracle, and has spent the remainder of her life teaching people about the reality of hell. That was a passage from Answers detailing Tamara's account with hell. I found another story detailing her account with death as well, and it describes how she saw hundreds of souls screaming and crying out in agony for help. Imagine how horrible that must have been, to be stuck in hell crying out for eternity for somebody to save you or just end your suffering. It's no wonder that Tamara has written 2 books talking about this experience and the blessing that is our lives. Moral of this story and other ones, guys, is that enjoy today, enjoy tomorrow, and pretty much all the days that you have in your life, because one day we could end up there. And finally, number 1 on this list is Howard Storm. Wikipedia writes, in June 1985, Storm took a group of his students on a field trip to Europe. After returning to his Paris hotel room with his wife around 11 a.m. from a morning excursion, he had a sudden onset of severe abdominal pain. He was evaluated at the Paris hospital and diagnosed with a duodenal perforation, which required surgery. The earliest a surgeon could perform this procedure was around 9 p.m. that day. As he lay waiting for surgery, he truly believed that he was going to die due to the severity of his pain, and so mentally prepared himself for death. After saying goodbye to his wife, he eventually passed out. Storm reports the following subconscious experience. He opened his eyes and found himself standing outside of his body, looking down at the hospital bed with his wife crying beside him. He was without pain and hypersensitive. His wife could not see or hear him. He was then drawn by voices calling his name outside the hospital room, and he followed them, believing they were taking him to a doctor. He describes pale humanoid creatures that urged him down the hallway, saying they had been waiting for him. The creatures became increasingly hostile, and when he refused to continue following them, they began to attack him. He then heard a voice saying, "Pray to God," and so he recited fragments of Bible verses and the Pledge of Allegiance. With the mention of the word God, the creatures would retract, and eventually he was alone again. After a period of time, he called out for Jesus to save him, and suddenly was rescued by spiritual beings of light. Pale, humanoid, hostile figures. This sounds a lot like Howard was on his way to hell and seeing what I can only imagine are a form of demon. Some other reports of his experience talk about how he started to feel horrible pain all over his body. It felt as if there was going to be endless torment coming and that there was no escape. This experience was enough to turn Howard into a devout Catholic from an atheist. Apparently he believes God was the only thing that saved him from currently being in this demonic hell. Well, there you have it, guys. That is our list of the top 5 real people who claim to have visited hell, part 3. Please comment down below what you thought about this video and some other stories of people who have seen hell before. Also, please hit the like and subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching. I've been your host, Nicholas Playlog, and I'll catch you next time.